Jackson stared at his phone, reading the text message for the third time, his mind refusing to process the words glowing on the screen. After our fight, I'm staying at Chris's place tonight. Deal with it. Chris, her ex-boyfriend. The message wasn't sent in the heat of anger or by accident. It was deliberate, designed to hurt, to provoke. 3 years together, 8 months engaged, and this was how she chose to communicate. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. A dozen responses formed and dissolved in his mind. Pleas, threats, accusations. Instead, he set the phone down on the kitchen counter and looked at the apartment they shared, suddenly seeing it with new clarity. Deal with it, she had written. So he would. Jackson Matthews pulled his work truck into the driveway, the logo Matthews Electric freshly painted on its side. 6 o'clock, earlier than usual. He'd finished the Hendersons' rewiring job ahead of schedule, a point of pride for a man who measured himself by promises kept. The small bungalow he shared with Brianna looked welcoming enough, lights already on inside. 3 years together, the last 8 months engaged. The diamond ring had cost him nearly 3 months' earnings, a stretch for an independent electrician, but seeing her face when he'd proposed had been worth every penny. "Hey, I'm home," he called, hanging his keys on the hook by the door. The kitchen counter sparkled, dinner preparations underway. Routine, predictable, safe. Brianna glanced up from chopping vegetables. "You're early." Her tone was neutral, but something in her expression seemed off. "Finished the Hendersons' job. Mrs. Henderson brought me lemonade." He washed his hands at the sink. "Need help with dinner?" "I've got it." She turned back to her cutting board. "How much did they pay?" Jackson noticed the slight tightening around her eyes. "Money questions again. Exactly what I quoted them." "Why?" "Just wondering if we can afford that weekend in the mountains next month." She scraped the vegetables into a waiting pan. "We'll make it work." He reached for her, hand resting briefly on her shoulder. "I promised you, didn't I?" Her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sure." The engagement calendar hung on the refrigerator, their future mapped out in Brianna's precise handwriting. Wedding plans, house hunting notes, even tentative baby names scribbled in the margins. A shared future that had seemed so certain this morning. "I saw that Maureen called you, twice." Brianna's voice broke the dinner silence, casual in a way that immediately put Jackson on alert. Client's wife. Their basement flooded, damaged the electrical panel. He kept his tone even. "I'm bidding the repair job tomorrow." "She couldn't text you the details?" Brianna speared a piece of chicken with unnecessary force. Jackson set down his fork. "What's this really about, Bri?" "It's about you working late every night, then getting calls from women at all hours." The pretense of casualness vanished. "She's 62 with grandchildren." Jackson felt a familiar weariness settle in. This pattern had become more frequent. Innocent situations twisted into accusations. "And I came home early today, if you noticed." "Because you're so thoughtful, right?" Her laugh held no humor. "St. Jackson, the perfect fiancé. I'm not claiming to be perfect." He struggled to keep his voice measured. "But I don't deserve this interrogation over a work call." "It's not just that." She pushed her plate away. "It's everything. You decide our finances, you pick our friends, you control everything." The unfairness of this stung. "I've never controlled you, Brianna. We make decisions together." "Like the wedding venue?" You immediately sided with your mother. "I suggested we consider her idea." "That's hardly siding with anyone." "This is pointless." Brianna stood abruptly. "You never listen. You just defend yourself and make me sound crazy." I'm listening right now, Jackson said, fighting to keep frustration from his voice. But accusations about random client calls aren't exactly constructive. I need some air. She grabbed her purse from the counter. Don't wait up. Brianna, come on. This is fixable. Where are you going? She paused at the door, something cold and deliberate crossing her face. Out. The door slammed, leaving Jackson alone in the suddenly silent kitchen, their half-eaten dinner cooling on the table. The engagement calendar stared back at him from the refrigerator, future plans now seeming like fiction. Jackson cleaned the kitchen methodically, giving his hands something to do while his mind replayed the argument. Had he missed something? Their disagreements had been increasing lately, but this felt different. Manufactured, almost. He was loading the dishwasher when his phone vibrated. Relief washed over him. Brianna, ready to talk, but the message on his screen froze him in place. After our fight, I'm staying at Chris's place tonight. Deal with it. Chris, her ex-boyfriend from before they'd met, a name she rarely mentioned, except once when drunk, confessing they occasionally texted as friends. Jackson read the message again, feeling as though the floor had dropped away beneath him. This wasn't an impulsive decision. She'd driven straight to another man's apartment. The deliberate cruelty of it, not just going there, but telling him about it, struck him like a physical blow. His thumb hovered over the keyboard. Part of him wanted to respond with anger, another part to beg her to come home. Both reactions, he realized with sudden clarity, were exactly what she wanted. Either way, she would win the upper hand. He set the phone down, feeling strangely calm as understanding crystallized. This wasn't about Maureen's call or wedding venues. This was about power, a calculated move to hurt him, to make him plead or rage, to establish dominance in their relationship. Jackson looked around the kitchen, at the home they'd built together, at the calendar with its neatly planned future. For the first time, he saw the pattern clearly, the subtle manipulations, the manufactured arguments, the disproportionate reactions designed to keep him off balance. Deal with it, she had written, a challenge and a dismissal in 3 words. He picked up his phone again, but didn't type a response. Instead, he walked to the bedroom closet and pulled out a suitcase. Some boundaries, once crossed, couldn't be uncrossed. Some revelations, once seen, couldn't be unseen. He would deal with it, but not in the way Brianna expected. The house settled into midnight silence as Jackson sat in the living room, the text message still glowing on his phone screen. I'm staying at Chris's place tonight. Deal with it. 6 words that had instantly rewritten everything he thought he knew about his relationship. The initial shock had faded into a strange, crystalline clarity. He placed the phone face down on the coffee table and leaned back, surveying the room they had furnished together over 3 years. Photos of vacations, family gatherings, their engagement celebration. The throw pillows Brianna had insisted on buying despite their impracticality. The oversized armchair that had been his one non-negotiable piece of furniture. His gaze settled on their engagement photo displayed prominently on the mantel. Brianna smiling up at him, diamond ring catching the light, her hand resting possessively on his chest. Had there been signs he'd missed, or had he simply chosen not to see them? The truth was, this text wasn't an aberration, but a revelation, the mask slipping to show what lay beneath. The manufactured arguments, the emotional manipulation, the subtle way she'd isolated him from friends who didn't respect their relationship, the constant shifts in expectation that kept him perpetually off balance, always working to prove himself worthy. Jackson removed his own engagement ring, the simple gold band that had felt so meaningful when he'd first put it on. He turned it in his fingers, watching it catch the dim light. Some lines, once crossed, changed everything. This wasn't just about one night with an ex-boyfriend. It was about deliberate cruelty designed to wound and control. He set the ring beside his phone and stood, a decision crystallizing not from anger, but from a quiet certainty about what self-respect demanded. The answer to Brianna's challenge, deal with it, suddenly seemed obvious. Jackson moved through the pre-dawn darkness with methodical purpose. He'd laid out 3 plastic storage bins in the bedroom, each labeled with masking tape: Brianna's, shared, and undecided. The clinical organization felt appropriate, an orderly response to emotional chaos. He started with her clothing, removing each item from the closet with careful detachment: the red dress from their first anniversary dinner, the cashmere sweater he'd given her last Christmas, the workout clothes she rarely used but insisted on buying, each item folded precisely, placed in the appropriate bin without hesitation. From the bathroom, he gathered her extensive collection of cosmetics and toiletries, the expensive brands she insisted were necessities. He wrapped glass bottles in tissue paper to prevent breakage, a courtesy she wouldn't have extended in his place, he realized. The jewelry box required more consideration. He removed each piece that he had given her, setting aside the diamond engagement ring she'd left on the dresser. $8,000, nearly a quarter of his annual profit from his small business, now just another possession to be returned. In the living room, he selected photos that were exclusively hers, leaving family pictures and shared memories in the undecided bin. The process felt like archaeological excavation, unearthing the layers of a relationship that had been built on shifting sand. Certain items triggered flashes of memory: the shell collection from their beach vacation, tickets from concerts they'd attended, birthday cards with declarations of eternal love. He placed these in the shared bin, acknowledging their dual ownership without sentimentality. By 6 a.m., the bins were filled, labeled, and sealed. He loaded them into his truck methodically, each one representing a portion of their life together, now carefully compartmentalized. The physical act of separation had clarified his emotional state, not anger or despair, but resolution. He returned to the bedroom for one final item, placing the engagement ring in a small velvet box. This last piece of their shared history would be delivered personally, completing the circle that had begun with a hopeful proposal and ended with a deliberately cruel text message. The GPS directed Jackson to a modest apartment complex on the other side of town. "You have arrived at your destination," the automated voice announced with ironic finality. He sat in his truck for a moment, gathering his composure, rehearsing the brief words he might need to say. He loaded the bins onto a dolly borrowed from his work truck and navigated through the parking lot. 3rd floor, apartment 312. The morning was still quiet, most residents not yet awake on a Saturday. The elevator hummed as it carried him and Brianna's possessions upward. Jackson knocked firmly on the door, standing straight, face composed. Footsteps approached from inside, followed by a pause, someone looking through the peephole. The door opened to reveal not Brianna, but a man approximately his age, dark-haired and slightly disheveled from sleep. Chris, the ex-boyfriend turned current complication. "Can I help you?" Chris asked, confusion evident in his voice. "I'm Jackson." He kept his tone neutral, professional. "Brianna's fiancé, or former fiancé. She texted that she was staying here." Recognition and discomfort crossed Chris's face. "Oh, yeah, she's still asleep. I've brought her things." Jackson gestured to the bins. "Everything she'll need immediately. The rest can be arranged later." Chris's expression shifted from confusion to something like respect. "Man, I'm sorry. She said you guys had broken up weeks ago, that she was just staying at your place until she found somewhere else." The information should have hurt, but instead it only confirmed what Jackson had already realized. Well, we broke up last night, when she texted me from here. An awkward silence stretched between them, two men connected by a woman who had lied to them both. "I'll take these in," Chris finally said, reaching for the dolly. "And I think you should know, this isn't the first time she's done this." Jackson handed him the small velvet box. Her engagement ring, $8,000. She should return it or keep it, her choice. "I'll tell her." As Jackson turned to leave, he felt strangely unburdened. The confrontation he'd anticipated hadn't materialized. Instead, there was this unexpected moment of male solidarity, a witness to his dignity in the face of betrayal. The elevator descended, and with it came a sense of something completing. He had dealt with it, not as Brianna had intended, but on his own terms. As he walked back to his truck, the morning sun breaking over the horizon, he felt the first false sense of closure. One chapter ended, not realizing that the story was far from over. 2 weeks had passed since Jackson had delivered Brianna's belongings to Chris's apartment. The initial relief of decisive action had settled into a tentative routine. Wake up, work, come home to the now half-empty house, sleep, repeat. The silence, where Brianna's voice should have been, felt both peaceful and unsettling, like the stillness before a storm. At Westside Electric's small office, Jackson finished paperwork for the Henderson job, while his friend and fellow electrician Mike leaned against the doorframe. "Henderson's finally paid up," Jackson said, filing the invoice. 2 days early even. Miracles never cease. Mike paused, then ventured carefully. "So, heard anything from her?" Jackson shook his head. "Radio silence, which is fine by me." "That's good, right?" Mike scratched his beard thoughtfully. "Clean break and all that." "Yeah." Jackson straightened a stack of receipts. "Her stuff's gone. Engagement's off. Life moves on. You seem better. Last week you looked like you hadn't slept in days." Jackson managed a small smile. "Amazing what not walking on eggshells will do for your complexion." "Well, Sarah wants you to come for dinner Friday. Nothing fancy, just burgers, no setups, promise." "I'd like that." Jackson checked his watch. "I should head to the Wilson job, rewiring their basement." As he loaded tools into his truck, Jackson felt a weight lifted. The absence of Brianna's constant texts asking his whereabouts, the freedom from explaining every interaction with female clients. The discomfort of ending a 3-year relationship was gradually being replaced by the realization of how much energy it had consumed. Yet beneath this surface calm, an unacknowledged anxiety lingered. The clean break felt too easy, too complete. Brianna had never been one to relinquish control without a fight, and her silence didn't feel like acceptance. It felt like preparation. The notification came while Jackson was ordering supplies at the electrical wholesaler, a fraud alert from his credit card company. He stepped outside to take the call, the spring sunshine at odds with the growing knot in his stomach. "Mr. Matthews, this is Diane from Capital One Fraud Prevention. We've detected some unusual activity on your account. Have you recently applied for several new credit cards?" "No." Jackson leaned against his truck. "What kind of activity?" "There have been 6 credit applications submitted using your Social Security number in the past week, all from different companies." The knot tightened. "I haven't applied for any new cards. I'm also seeing attempts to open store accounts at Nordstrom, Macy's, and Best Buy. These were flagged because the address and phone number don't match your account information." Jackson closed his eyes briefly. "Can you tell me what address was used?" Diane read off an address he recognized immediately. Chris's apartment building. "I didn't authorize any of this," he said, his voice steady despite the churning in his gut. "Someone is using my information fraudulently." You'll need to file a police report and contact the credit bureaus immediately. I'm placing a fraud alert on your file, but you should request a credit freeze as well." Diane's professional tone shifted slightly. "If you don't mind my asking, do you have any idea who might have access to your personal information?" "My ex-fiancé." The words came out flat, matter of fact. "We broke up 2 weeks ago." "I see." Her voice held recognition of a familiar pattern. "Unfortunately, that's common in these situations. We'll need to document everything. The unauthorized use of your personal information constitutes identity theft, which is a criminal offense." As Diane detailed the necessary steps, Jackson felt a strange clarity replacing his initial shock. This wasn't an emotional reaction to rejection. This was a calculated attempt to cause lasting damage, to reach into his life and create chaos even after he'd removed himself from her reach. "I'll head to the police station now," he said, checking his watch. "And thank you. If you hadn't caught this—" "That's why we're here, Mr. Matthews. And good luck. These situations can be challenging, but they're solvable with proper documentation." Hanging up, Jackson stared at his phone, the false peace of the past 2 weeks shattered by this new reality. The break hadn't been clean at all. It had merely gone underground. 3 days later, Jackson sat across from Officer Trent at the police station, adding another document to an increasingly thick file. The past 72 hours had been a blur of credit bureaus, police reports, and identity theft affidavits. Each call had revealed new violations, attempts to open utilities, cell phone accounts, even a car loan application. "So this just came in," Officer Trent said, sliding a printout across the desk. "Thought you should see it right away." Jackson scanned the document, a pawnshop transaction record. His stomach dropped as he recognized the item description. "Lady's diamond engagement ring, 1.5 carat center stone with halo setting." "That's her engagement ring," he said quietly. "The one I gave her. Sold 3 days ago for $3,500. Officer Trent tapped the paper. "Original receipt shows you paid $8,000. She had no right to sell it. I left it with her belongings. I thought—" Jackson shook his head. "I don't know what I thought. Well, legally, an engagement ring is a conditional gift. When the engagement ends, the ring should be returned to the purchaser." Officer Trent leaned forward. "The value makes this grand theft a felony. Combined with the identity theft charges, we're looking at serious consequences." Jackson stared at the transaction record, the final confirmation of Brianna's intentions. The ring had represented his commitment, his hopes for their future. Now its sale represented something else entirely, a deliberate attempt to hurt him financially and emotionally. "What happens now?" he asked. "We add this to the case file. The detective already has the identity theft evidence." Officer Trent's expression softened slightly. "Look, I've seen these situations before. They can get worse before they get better. Have you considered a restraining order?" "I haven't seen or heard from her directly since we broke up," Jackson said. "Everything's been behind the scenes." That's how it starts. Then they realize the financial damage isn't giving them the satisfaction they want, and things escalate. He pulled out another form. A protective order would legally prevent her from contacting you or coming near your home or workplace. As Jackson began filling out the form, the weight of what was happening settled fully on his shoulders. This wasn't just about unauthorized credit cards or even the stolen ring. This was a campaign, methodically planned and executed, designed to inflict maximum damage on his life. "I never thought she'd go this far," he said, almost to himself. "People show who they really are when they don't get what they want," Officer Trent replied. The good news is we have solid evidence. The system works if you use it properly." Jackson nodded, signing his name to the restraining order request. The initial shock had hardened into resolve. If this was war, he would fight it not with emotional reactions, but with the full force of the law. "Mr. Matthews, I'm Detective Sawyer with the Department of Children and Family Services." The woman at Jackson's door held up an official ID. Behind her stood a uniformed police officer, his expression unreadable. "We need to speak with you regarding a serious complaint." Jackson felt his mouth go dry. "What kind of complaint?" "May we come in?" Her tone was professionally neutral, but her eyes were already scanning what she could see of his home. Jackson stepped aside, mind racing. As they entered his living room, Detective Sawyer pulled out a notepad. "We've received a report that you're operating an unlicensed daycare facility and possibly endangering children." "What?" Jackson stared at her in disbelief. "That's completely false. I'm an electrician. I live alone. There are no children here." "The report was quite specific," she continued. "It claimed you're watching up to 6 children regularly without proper licensing or safety precautions." Mike, who had driven Jackson home after his truck developed engine trouble, stepped forward from the kitchen. "I can verify he's not running any daycare. I've been his business partner for 5 years." Detective Sawyer made a note. "And you are?" "Mike Callahan. We own West Side Electric together." The officer moved toward the hallway. "Mind if we take a quick look around, just to verify?" "Go ahead," Jackson said, fighting to keep his voice steady. "But this is obviously some kind of mistake." As the officer conducted a perfunctory search, Detective Sawyer continued. "We've also received a separate complaint about a possible gas leak that could endanger the neighborhood. The gas company will need to inspect your home." "There's no gas line to this house," Jackson said. "It's all electric. I had the gas disconnected when I renovated last year." She raised an eyebrow. "That contradicts our report." "Your report is false," Jackson said firmly, "just like the daycare accusation." The officer returned to the living room. "House is clear. No signs of child care equipment or children." "Would you like to tell me who filed these reports?" Jackson asked. Detective Sawyer closed her notebook. "Reports are anonymous, but given the specific nature of these claims, we had to investigate." She paused. "This isn't the first false report we've received recently. There was another claiming you were housing exotic animals." "I know exactly who's behind this." Jackson handed her a copy of his restraining order. "My ex-fiancée has been systematically harassing me. I've already filed reports for identity theft and grand larceny." Detective Sawyer examined the document. "I'll add this false reporting to your case file. And Mr. Matthews, document everything, every call, every visit, every false claim." It builds the pattern. After they left, Mike let out a low whistle. "Man, she's really going nuclear." Jackson sank onto the couch, the momentary relief of vindication already fading. "This is just the beginning, isn't it? I need to reschedule the Wilsons' job again." Jackson stood in the cramped office of Westside Electric, running a hand through his hair. "I have to meet with the fraud department at the bank." Earl, their office manager and dispatcher, frowned at the schedule board. "That's the 3rd reschedule this month. Mrs. Wilson called yesterday. Not happy." "I know. I'm sorry." Jackson checked his watch. "I don't have a choice." "Look, Jackson," Earl said, lowering his voice, although the office was empty except for them. "I've known you since you were an apprentice. You're the most reliable contractor we have, but these cancellations are affecting the business." "It's temporary," Jackson said. "Once the identity theft case is resolved, it's not just the reschedules. Earl turned his computer monitor toward Jackson. "Have you seen the reviews?" Jackson leaned forward to read the screen, his stomach dropping. 3 one-star reviews posted in the last week. "Hired Matthews to rewire my kitchen. Caught him going through my medicine cabinet. Stay away. Unprofessional and scary. Made inappropriate comments to my teenage daughter. Showed up drunk to give estimate. When confronted, became aggressive." "These are all lies," Jackson said, his voice tight. "I've never even met these clients." "I know that," Earl said, "but potential customers don't. Our ratings dropped from 4.8 to 3.2 in 2 weeks. Mike appeared in the doorway, having overheard. "We can report them as fake." "Already tried," Earl said. "Review sites require proof they're false, which is nearly impossible to provide." Jackson stared at the screen, the scope of Brianna's campaign becoming clear. She wasn't just attacking his personal life, she was systematically dismantling his livelihood. "I've built this business for 7 years," he said quietly. "My reputation is everything in this industry." Earl's expression softened. "We'll figure it out. Maybe take some time off from client visits. Handle the paperwork and ordering while Mike covers your jobs." "No," Jackson said firmly. "That's exactly what she wants, to make me hide, to disrupt my life. I'm not giving her that satisfaction." "At least let me come with you to client visits for a while," Mike suggested. "Having a witness might help if there are more false accusations." Jackson nodded reluctantly. The solution made sense, but the necessity of it felt like another violation. He'd always valued his independence, the trust his clients placed in him. Now he needed a chaperone to protect himself from invisible attacks. "Just until things settle," he agreed, though the words felt hollow. Nothing about this situation suggested it would settle anytime soon. As he left for the bank meeting, Jackson felt the weight of scrutiny from everyone he passed. Did they believe the reviews? Were they wondering if the rumors were true? The invisible nature of reputational damage made it impossible to defend against. How do you fight whispers and digital lies that multiply faster than you can address them? The Gardner wedding reception was in full swing, a welcome distraction from the constant pressure of the past few weeks. As the best friend of the groom's brother, Jackson had almost declined the invitation, but Mike and Sarah had insisted he come. "You can't put your life on hold," Sarah had said, and reluctantly he'd agreed. Now, sipping a club soda at a corner table, he felt almost normal watching couples twirl across the dance floor. The restraining order had been in effect for nearly a month. The credit bureaus had frozen his accounts. The false reviews, while damaging, had slowed as their obvious fraudulence became apparent. "Jackson?" A familiar voice jolted him from his thoughts. "Having fun hiding?" Brianna stood before him, her blue dress matching the wedding colors perfectly, as if she belonged there, an uninvited guest who had somehow slipped past the venue's security. "You need to leave," he said quietly, immediately aware of nearby guests who might overhear. "There's a restraining order. You can't be within 500 feet of me." "I was invited," she said, though her smirk suggested otherwise. "The Gardners love me. We're practically family." "Brianna, I'm serious. You're violating a court order." Jackson stood, trying to create distance without causing a scene. "Oh, always so concerned with rules." She stepped closer, her voice carrying just enough for nearby tables to notice. "Is that why you're telling people I stole from you? Filing false police reports?" Jackson maintained his composure, despite the twisting in his gut. "Please leave now, or I'll have to call security." "Go ahead." Her eyes gleamed with something close to triumph. "Tell everyone how you're the victim. Poor Jackson, so mistreated by his crazy ex." He noticed people turning to watch, curiosity and discomfort on their faces. The bride's parents at a nearby table, the DJ slowing the music, the bubble of attention expanding around them. "I'm not doing this here," Jackson said firmly. "This is Tim and Jessica's wedding. I won't let you ruin their day." "You ruined my life!" Her voice rose sharply, the practiced control slipping. "You promised to marry me, then threw me away like garbage. Left my things on a stranger's doorstep." Several guests gasped. The bride and groom had stopped dancing, staring in their direction. "Security?" Jackson called, making eye contact with the venue manager. "This woman is violating a restraining order." Two security guards approached cautiously. Brianna, sensing her time was limited, escalated. "He's lying. There's no restraining order. He's the one who's been harassing me." She grabbed a champagne flute from a nearby table and threw the contents at Jackson's face. The cold liquid splashed across his shirt and face, but he remained motionless, refusing to react. The silence in the room was absolute. "Ma'am, you need to come with us," one of the guards said firmly. "Ask him about the women he brings to our house," she shouted as they took her arms. "Ask him why he canceled our wedding. Ask him—" The doors closed behind them, cutting off her voice. In the stunned silence that followed, Jackson felt dozens of eyes on him, witnessing his humiliation, his carefully constructed professional life, his privacy, his dignity, all violated in a public spectacle. Tim, the groom, approached and placed a hand on his shoulder. "Everyone saw what happened. We'll all provide statements about the restraining order violation." Jackson nodded, unable to speak past the tightness in his throat. The kindness was a lifeline, but it couldn't erase the public shame of the moment. As the music hesitantly resumed and guests pretended to return to celebrating, he slipped away to the restroom to dry his face and collect himself. In the mirror, he confronted his dripping reflection and the full weight of his situation. This wasn't just about identity theft or false reviews or even public humiliation. It was about a systematic campaign to destroy everything he had built: his business, his reputation, his peace of mind. And for the first time since it all began, Jackson wasn't sure he had the strength to fight it alone. The law office of Brenner Associates occupied the fourth floor of a restored Victorian building downtown. Jackson sat in the reception area, a leather portfolio containing his documentation on his lap. The space exuded a quiet confidence: dark wood paneling, law books lining built-in shelves, discreet awards mounted on the walls. A stark contrast to the chaos that had become his life. "Mr. Matthews, Rebecca Brenner will see you now." The receptionist led him down a hallway to a corner office with large windows overlooking the city park. Rebecca Brenner rose from behind her desk, extending her hand. Mid-50s, silver-streaked hair in a practical bob, reading glasses hanging from a chain around her neck. "Jackson Matthews, thank you for seeing me on short notice. Officer Trent speaks highly of you," she said, gesturing to a chair. "He mentioned this is an unusual harassment case." Jackson placed his portfolio on her desk. It started with a text message from my fiancée saying she was staying at her ex-boyfriend's apartment. "When I ended the engagement, she began a systematic campaign against me." "Tell me everything," Rebecca said, opening a legal pad. "Start from the beginning." For the next 20 minutes, Jackson detailed the escalating attacks: identity theft, stolen engagement ring, false reviews, fake reports to authorities, and finally, the wedding confrontation. She violated the restraining order in front of at least 60 witnesses, he concluded. "I have statements from 12 of them, including the bride and groom." Rebecca nodded, making notes. This is textbook malicious harassment with several felony components. The identity theft and ring theft are straightforward criminal matters. The restraining order violation adds another layer. What I need to know is, will it stop? Jackson leaned forward. Every time I think it can't get worse, it does. People like your ex-fiancé escalate until they face real consequences, Rebecca said frankly. But the good news is, you've done everything right. You've documented methodically, involved authorities appropriately, and avoided retaliating. That gives us leverage. What's the next step? We compile everything into a comprehensive case file and request an emergency hearing based on the restraining order violation. She tapped her pen thoughtfully. The identity theft and grand larceny charges will proceed separately through criminal court, but we can use them to demonstrate pattern and intent. For the first time in weeks, Jackson felt a flicker of hope. So there's actually a way through this? Absolutely, Rebecca said with quiet confidence. The system works when you have evidence, and from what you've shown me, we have plenty. What we need now is organization. Every incident documented, every witness statement collected, every piece of evidence preserved. I've started that process, but it's overwhelming. That's why you have me now. She stood, signaling a shift from information gathering to action. By this time next week, we'll have a systematic record of every violation, ready for court. In the meantime, continue documenting everything, but know you're not facing this alone anymore. As Jackson left the office, the spring sunlight seemed brighter somehow. The burden hadn't disappeared, but it had been shared, acknowledged by someone with the power and knowledge to help shoulder it. Jackson transformed his spare bedroom into an evidence command center over the weekend. The folding table from his work truck became a desk, supporting his laptop and a new printer scanner. On the wall, he mounted a large corkboard where he created a timeline of events, each incident marked with a color-coded pin, red for identity theft, blue for false reports, yellow for direct confrontations. Mike arrived Sunday afternoon carrying a cardboard box. Brought some supplies, Sarah insisted. He unpacked file folders, dividers, a label maker, and several storage bins. Your wife thinks of everything, Jackson said, examining the label maker. She's organized our taxes for 15 years. Says proper documentation is like armor. Mike surveyed the room. Impressive setup already. Jackson nodded toward the laptop. I've created digital folders for each category of harassment. Everything gets scanned and stored in triplicate, local drive, cloud storage, and external backup. He demonstrated the system, pulling a police report from a folder and feeding it through the scanner. Every document gets a date code and incident number, then filed physically and digitally. Meticulous, Mike observed, just like your electrical work. It's the only way to maintain sanity. Jackson added the newly scanned document to its digital folder. When everything else feels out of control, at least I can control this. They worked together, organizing physical documents, police reports, bank statements, credit bureau correspondence, witness statements from the wedding. Each piece of evidence represented a violation, but collectively they formed something else, a systematic defense. Check this out, Jackson said, opening a spreadsheet on his laptop. I've created a master document tracking every incident, date, time, type of harassment, witnesses, evidence, official reports filed. Mike whistled. This is better organized than our business records. Rebecca says judges respond to patterns. This shows not just individual incidents, but the deliberate, sustained nature of the campaign. Jackson scrolled through the spreadsheet, now containing over 30 documented incidents. It's not emotional, it's factual. The emotional distance the system provided was perhaps its greatest benefit. Each violation, once documented and filed, became less a personal wound and more a piece of evidence. The process transformed Jackson from victim to investigator of his own case. As evening approached, they stepped back to assess their work. The room had undergone a remarkable transformation, from chaotic collection of incidents to organized case file. Physical documents filled labeled folders in storage bins. Digital files mirrored the physical organization. The timeline on the wall provided visual confirmation of the escalating pattern. "We should get dinner," Mike suggested. "Sarah's making lasagna." Jackson hesitated, glancing at the remaining work. "The system's in place," Mike said. "The rest can wait till tomorrow." Jackson nodded, realizing his friend was right. The documentation system wasn't just about organizing evidence, it was about reclaiming control, establishing boundaries between the harassment and his life. And part of that meant not letting Brianna's actions dictate every moment of his time. "Lasagna sounds perfect," he said, switching off the desk lamp. As they left, he glanced back at the room, no longer a space of chaos and violation, but one of order and purpose. For the first time in weeks, he felt not just reactive, but proactive, not just surviving, but preparing to fight back. 1 week later, Jackson sat beside Rebecca in her office, his evidence binders arranged neatly on her conference table. Across from them, Rebecca's paralegal Marcus operated a laptop connected to a large monitor on the wall. "Let's review what we have before Thursday's hearing," Rebecca said, opening the first binder. "The judge will have limited time, so we need our strongest evidence front and center." Marcus began displaying the digital evidence chronologically. First, the identity theft documentation, then the police reports about the engagement ring, followed by the false reviews and fraudulent complaints. "The timeline is compelling," Rebecca noted, "but the wedding video is our ace. Visual evidence of a restraining order violation witnessed by dozens of people." Marcus pulled up the video, which started playing on the large monitor. The footage, taken by one of the wedding guests, showed Brianna's confrontation with crystal clarity. Her uninvited arrival, aggressive behavior, and the moment she threw champagne at Jackson while he remained composed. "This is better than I expected," Rebecca said, watching intently. "Her behavior is unmistakably aggressive, while you remain calm throughout. And is that the bride's father stepping in at the end?" Jackson nodded. "Mr. Gardner." He provided a written statement confirming Brianna wasn't invited and that he personally heard me mention the restraining order. "Perfect." Rebecca made a note. "Respected community member as witness strengthens our case considerably." Marcus clicked to the next item, a compilation of social media posts where Brianna had publicly disparaged Jackson, some containing direct threats. "These posts have actually helped our case," Rebecca explained. "They demonstrate ongoing malicious intent despite the restraining order." "The posts were painful when they first appeared," Jackson admitted. "Now they're just evidence." Rebecca smiled slightly. "That's exactly the mindset we need. Emotional detachment allows strategic thinking." They continued through the evidence, Rebecca occasionally flagging items for priority presentation. The systematic documentation painted an undeniable picture of harassment that had escalated from personal to professional to public. "What we have here," Rebecca said, closing the final binder, "is one of the most thoroughly documented harassment cases I've seen in 20 years of practice." "Will it be enough?" Jackson asked, the question that had haunted him for weeks. "More than enough for the emergency hearing," she assured him. "Judge Watkins takes restraining order violations very seriously. Based on this evidence, I expect he'll extend the protection order and likely add more stringent conditions. And the criminal charges? The DA has already indicated they're pursuing felony charges for the identity theft and grand larceny. The restraining order violation adds another charge. Rebecca leaned forward, her expression serious but confident. Jackson, what you've done here, methodically documenting everything, avoiding retaliation, working through proper channels, has created an airtight case. Marcus closed the laptop. I prepared digital presentations for both the emergency hearing and the criminal proceedings. Everything is organized for maximum impact in limited court time. For the first time since the nightmare began, Jackson felt the weight lifting. Not just because professionals were now handling his case, but because his own actions, his methodical documentation, his refusal to sink to Brianna's level, had created the path to resolution. "The system works," Rebecca said, echoing her words from their first meeting. "But only when you give it the tools to work with. You've done exactly that." As they finalized preparations for Thursday's hearing, Jackson realized he'd crossed an invisible threshold. He was no longer merely a victim seeking protection, but an active participant in the justice process. The evidence room, the documentation system, the organized case file, these weren't just defensive measures, but the foundation of his restoration. The county courthouse stood as a monument to order and process, its marble columns and broad steps a stark contrast to the chaotic months that had led Jackson here. Inside courtroom 3, he sat beside Rebecca Brenner at the plaintiff's table, his evidence binders neatly arranged before them. Across the aisle, Brianna sat with her court-appointed attorney, her usual confident demeanor subdued. The restraining order violation hearing had been merged with a preliminary hearing on the felony charges, consolidating the legal proceedings into one comprehensive case. Judge Watkins, a stern-faced man in his 60s, called the court to order. "We're here on case number 2023 CV 4872, Matthews v. Collins, regarding violations of a protection order, as well as the related criminal charges of identity theft, grand larceny, and criminal harassment." He peered over his reading glasses. "Mr. Brenner, you may proceed with your presentation." Rebecca rose, her manner composed and authoritative. "Your Honor, in the past 3 months, the defendant has engaged in a systematic campaign of harassment against my client, beginning with identity theft, escalating to theft of valuable property, and culminating in a deliberate violation of the protection order issued by this court." She presented the evidence methodically: bank records documenting the identity theft, the pawnshop receipt for the engagement ring, screenshots of false reviews, and finally, the wedding video. "As you can see, Your Honor, Miss Collins not only violated the restraining order by approaching my client, but created a public disturbance designed to cause maximum humiliation." The judge watched the video with a deepening frown, then turned to Brianna's attorney. "Counselor, how does your client respond to these charges?" The public defender rose reluctantly. "Your Honor, Ms. Collins acknowledges her presence at the wedding, but contends she was invited by mutual friends and didn't realize Mr. Matthews would be there. The video clearly shows Mr. Matthews informing her of the restraining order," Judge Watkins noted, "after which she escalated her behavior rather than departing." "She was emotionally distressed, Your Honor. The relationship ended abruptly." The judge held up his hand. "Emotional distress explains, but doesn't excuse criminal behavior, Counselor." He turned to Brianna directly. "Miss Collins, do you dispute the identity theft charges, the credit applications submitted in Mr. Matthews' name to your address?" For the first time, Brianna seemed to realize the gravity of her situation. I was just trying to get his attention. He ended our engagement without even talking to me. By committing felony identity theft. The judge's tone was incredulous. And the engagement ring valued at $8,000 that you sold for $3,500. It was a gift, she said weakly. An engagement ring is a conditional gift predicated on marriage, the judge corrected. When the engagement ended, legal ownership reverted to Mr. Matthews. Rebecca interjected, "Your Honor, we have 12 witness statements from the wedding incident, including from the bride, groom, and the bride's father, a respected local business owner, all confirming Ms. Collins was not invited and was explicitly informed of the restraining order before her confrontation." Judge Watkins nodded, examining the statements. "I've seen enough to make a preliminary ruling. This court finds clear evidence of multiple violations warranting immediate action." Given the severity and pattern of these violations, Judge Watkins continued, this court issues the following orders. The temporary restraining order is upgraded to a permanent order of protection with enhanced restrictions. Ms. Collins is prohibited from coming within 1,000 feet of Mr. Matthews, his home, workplace, or family members. The judge shuffled through his papers, addressing the criminal charges. Regarding the felony counts, there is sufficient evidence to proceed to trial. However, the court notes that Ms. Collins is currently serving probation for a previous conviction of check fraud. This revelation surprised Jackson. He glanced at Brianna, who stared fixedly at the table before her. The probation violation alone mandates immediate consequences, the judge continued. Miss Collins, your probation is hereby revoked. You will be remanded to county custody to serve the remainder of your suspended sentence, 18 months, while awaiting trial on these new charges. Brianna's composure finally cracked. You can't do that. I have a job, an apartment. You should have considered those responsibilities before violating your probation, Judge Watkins said firmly. The evidence of criminal conduct is overwhelming and includes video documentation of your restraining order violation. As two deputies approached to take Brianna into custody, she turned to Jackson, her expression a mixture of anger and disbelief. This is all your fault. I just wanted to talk to you. Jackson didn't respond, maintaining the same calm dignity that had guided him through the process. As Brianna was led away, he felt not triumph, but a complex mixture of emotions. Relief that the system had worked, sadness that it had come to this, and a strange sense of closure as the courtroom doors closed behind her. Outside on the courthouse steps, Rebecca gathered her files. The system worked exactly as it should. The evidence was irrefutable. I didn't expect the probation violation, Jackson admitted. Neither did her attorney, judging by his expression, Rebecca said. The check fraud explains her familiarity with identity theft tactics. She's done this before. Jackson looked back at the courthouse. 18 months seems significant. It's appropriate, Rebecca said gently. This wasn't a momentary lapse, but a sustained campaign. And remember, she'll still face trial for the new felony charges after serving the probation sentence. Jackson nodded, realizing Rebecca was right. The consequences weren't about vengeance, but about appropriate boundaries. Society's way of saying certain behaviors were unacceptable, regardless of emotional justifications. What happens now? He asked. You rebuild, Rebecca said simply. The case will proceed, but you've done your part. The permanent protection order gives you long-term security. The legal system will handle the rest. As they parted ways, Jackson walked alone through the courthouse plaza, feeling lighter with each step. The months of harassment had taken their toll, but now, for the first time, he could look forward rather than constantly watching his back. Justice hadn't erased what happened, but it had drawn a line under it, creating space for whatever came next. 3 weeks after the court hearing, Jackson found himself at Mike and Sarah's backyard barbecue, surrounded by friends and colleagues. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the lawn, where children played tag while adults clustered around the grill and beverage coolers. "Another burger?" Mike offered, spatula poised over the grill. "I'm good, thanks." Jackson sipped his iced tea, enjoying the simple pleasure of casual conversation without looking over his shoulder. Sarah appeared, leading a woman Jackson didn't recognize. "Jackson, this is my cousin Leah. She just moved here from Portland for a teaching position at Westridge Elementary." Leah offered her hand with a warm smile. Mid-30s, with auburn hair pulled back in a casual ponytail and intelligent eyes that crinkled slightly at the corners when she smiled. "Sarah's told me all about your electrical wizardry. Apparently, you're the only person who could figure out why her kitchen lights kept flickering." "Loose neutral connection," Jackson said, returning her smile. "Nothing magical about it." "Speak for yourself," Sarah interjected. "It was driving me crazy for months." She glanced between them. "Leah needs some help with her new apartment. The overhead lights aren't working in the bedroom." "Subtle, Sarah," Leah laughed. "Sorry about my cousin's transparent matchmaking." "I don't mind," Jackson admitted. "Though I should warn you, I do charge for electrical work." "Even if I offer dinner in exchange?" Leah asked. "I make a pretty amazing pasta carbonara." "Well, that changes things." Jackson found himself relaxing into the conversation, surprised by how natural it felt. "When did you move to town?" 3 weeks ago?" "I'm still living out of boxes, but the school year starts soon, so I'm trying to get settled." As Sarah drifted away to other guests, Jackson and Leah found a quiet spot under a maple tree. Their conversation flowed easily from her new job teaching 4th grade to his business expansion plans, from favorite hiking trails to shared taste in mystery novels. "So," Leah said, after a comfortable pause, "Sarah mentioned you've had a rough year." Jackson hesitated, uncertain how much Sarah had shared. "That's one way to put it." "You don't have to talk about it," she said quickly. "I just wanted you to know I'm not expecting anything, just friendly conversation, and maybe some electrical expertise." There was something refreshing about her directness, the absence of games or hidden agendas. "I appreciate that," he said. "I'm still figuring out what comes next." "I know that feeling. After my divorce 2 years ago, I couldn't imagine dating again. Then one day, I realized I was ready for new possibilities. Not necessarily relationships, just possibilities." The word resonated with Jackson. Possibilities. After months of being trapped in Brianna's destructive orbit, the future suddenly seemed open again. "I could take a look at those lights next weekend," he offered. "Sunday afternoon, maybe?" Sunday works, and the carbonara offer stands, regardless of how complicated the wiring turns out to be. As the evening wound down and guests began departing, Jackson and Leah exchanged phone numbers with the comfortable ease of two people who recognize something familiar in each other. Not the intensity of instant attraction, but the quiet recognition of shared values and authentic connection. Jackson was loading supplies into his truck when his phone buzzed with a message from Rebecca Brenner. He finished securing the electrical conduit before checking the text. Final sentencing complete. 18 months confirmed, plus 5 years probation after release. No contact provisions permanent. Call if you want details. He set the phone on the passenger seat and sat behind the wheel, taking a moment to absorb the news. The trial and sentencing had proceeded without requiring his presence, the evidence speaking for itself. Now, 4 months after that first devastating text message from Brianna, the legal process had reached its conclusion. Mike approached the truck, clipboard in hand. "Everything okay?" "Yeah," Jackson said, showing him the text. "Sentencing is final." Mike read the message and nodded. "That's it then. Done." "Done," Jackson echoed, the word feeling both definitive and oddly anticlimactic. "How do you feel?" Mike asked, leaning against the truck. Jackson considered the question. "Relieved, I guess. Not happy, exactly, but unburdened." He started the engine. "Like I can finally stop looking backward. That's worth celebrating." "Dinner at our place tonight. Sarah's making that pasta thing you like." "Thanks, but I actually have plans." Jackson smiled slightly. "I'm helping Leah hang some shelves." Mike grinned. "Hanging shelves already. Things must be getting serious." "Just taking it slow," Jackson said, though the warmth in his voice revealed more than his words. "One step at a time." As he drove to the next job site, Jackson realized that the notification hadn't triggered anxiety or anger or even satisfaction. Instead, there was a quiet sense of completion, not an emotional high point, but a period at the end of a difficult sentence. The chapter that had begun with Brianna's text was finally, officially closed, leaving him free to write whatever came next. He considered calling Rebecca for details, but decided against it. The specifics didn't matter anymore. What mattered was that the system had worked, justice had been served, and he could now direct his energy fully toward the future rather than defending against the past. Jackson turned up the radio and continued down the road, the legal document in his phone representing not an end, but a beginning. Leah's small bungalow glowed with warmth against the autumn evening. Inside, the aroma of garlic and herbs filled the kitchen as she stirred a pot of sauce while Jackson measured the living room wall for the bookshelf installation. 6 weeks had passed since their first meeting at Mike and Sarah's barbecue. 6 weeks of casual dinners, long conversations, and gradually increasing comfort in each other's presence. Tonight marked their 10th evening together, though neither had used the word date to describe their time together. "How does marinara sauce go with bookshelves?" Leah called from the kitchen. "Better than paint thinner and sawdust," Jackson replied, marking the stud locations on the wall. Leah appeared in the doorway, wooden spoon in hand. "That's a pretty low bar. I have realistic expectations." He smiled, then hesitated as their eyes met for a moment too long. He returned to his measurements, the familiar tension rising in his chest. Leah watched him, her expression softening. "You go somewhere sometimes," she said quietly, right in the middle of a conversation. Jackson set down his pencil. "I'm sorry. Don't be. I just wonder where you go." He sat on the couch, trying to articulate the feeling. "It's not about you. It's just, when things feel good, I start waiting for the other shoe to drop." Leah sat beside him, leaving a respectful distance between them. "Because of what happened with your ex?" "Partly," he admitted, "but it's more than that. I'm trying to figure out if I'm being cautious because of wisdom or because of fear." "What's the difference?" she asked. "Wisdom comes from experience. Fear comes from trauma." Jackson looked at her directly. "Wisdom protects you while letting you move forward. Fear just keeps you stuck." Leah considered this. "So which is it for you?" "That's what I'm trying to figure out." He gestured between them. "This feels different, better, but I thought I knew what I was doing last time, too. And you're worried about making the same mistake." "Yes," he said simply. Leah nodded, her expression thoughtful rather than hurt. "Can I tell you something?" When I got divorced, I was so angry at myself for not seeing the signs earlier. For 2 years, I analyzed every new person I met for any hint of my ex-husband's behavior. That's understandable, Jackson said. But eventually I realized something. I wasn't actually practicing discernment. I was just looking for reasons to run away. She met his eyes. There's a difference between learning from the past and being ruled by it. The words resonated, cutting through his defenses with their simple truth. I like you, Jackson, she continued. A lot. But I don't need you to be certain about us right now. I just need you to be honest, with me and with yourself. He reached across the space between them, taking her hand. The gesture was small but significant, a conscious choice to connect rather than withdraw. I like you too, he said, and I'm trying not to let old fears dictate new possibilities. Leah squeezed his hand gently. That's all anyone can ask for. The timer in the kitchen buzzed, breaking the moment. As Leah went to check the sauce, Jackson remained on the couch, aware that something had shifted. Not a dramatic breakthrough, but a quiet recognition that moving forward didn't require certainty, only courage and honesty. 3 weeks later, Jackson and Leah walked along the riverfront park as evening settled over the city. Fall leaves crunched beneath their feet, and the setting sun cast a golden glow across the water. They had just come from a community theater production where one of Leah's fourth-grade students had performed. Trevor was so proud you came, Jackson said. I saw him pointing you out to his parents. Those kids become like family, Leah admitted. Even the ones who drive me crazy. They reached a small footbridge and paused to watch the river flowing beneath them. Jackson felt a familiar contentment in her presence, a comfort that had deepened over the past weeks without pressure or expectation. I have something for you, he said, reaching into his jacket pocket. It's not a big deal, but... He handed her a small package wrapped in simple brown paper. Leah unwrapped it carefully to reveal a wooden keychain, hand-carved in the shape of a small book with L inlaid in copper wire. You made this, she said, running her fingers over the smooth wood. I've been experimenting with woodworking, a hobby that doesn't involve electrical current. It's beautiful. She looked up at him. Thank you. Jackson took a deep breath, gathering his courage. I've been thinking about what you said, about the difference between learning from the past and being ruled by it. Leah waited, giving him space to continue. After everything happened with Brianna, I started seeing relationships as inherently dangerous, like I needed perfect discernment to avoid getting hurt again. He traced the railing of the bridge with his finger. But that's impossible. There's no such thing as perfect certainty about another person. No, she agreed softly. There isn't. What there is, he continued, is learning to trust yourself again. Knowing that whatever happens, you can handle it. He looked at her directly. And finding someone worth taking the risk for. The implication hung in the air between them, neither rushing to fill the silence. Are you saying I'm worth the risk? Leah finally asked, a gentle smile playing at her lips. I'm saying I'd like to find out. Jackson moved closer, tentatively reaching for her hand. Officially, no more pretending we're just friends who happen to have dinner together 3 times a week. Leah laced her fingers through his. I'd like that. I can't promise I won't still have moments of doubt, he admitted. Old patterns don't disappear overnight. I don't need promises of perfection, she said. Just honesty and intention. The simplicity of her request, so different from the emotional minefields of his past relationship, felt like permission to breathe freely. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, Jackson felt the final weight lift from his shoulders. Not because he had all the answers or guarantees, but because he had chosen to trust again, not blindly, but with eyes open to both the risks and the possibilities. "So," Leah said, as they began walking again, hands still intertwined, "does this mean you'll finally let me pay for dinner sometime?" Jackson laughed, the sound carrying across the water. "I think I can handle that." The path ahead curved gently through the park, its destination not fully visible, but inviting nonetheless, like the journey they were beginning together, uncertain, but full of promise, guided not by the shadows of the past, but by the quiet hope of what might be. 1 year later, Jackson sat on his porch swing, watching the sunset paint the sky in strokes of gold and purple. The small garden Leah had helped him plant was thriving, tomatoes ripening on the vine, and marigolds adding splashes of color along the path. From inside the house came the gentle sounds of Leah making tea, her presence a comfortable constant in his life now. The journey from that text message to this moment of peace had been longer than the calendar suggested. Looking back, he could see how a single moment of betrayal had revealed what had been true all along, both about his former relationship and about himself. When people show you who they are, believe them, not just the first time, but every time. The lesson wasn't about cynicism or distrust, but about respecting the truth when it presented itself, however uncomfortable. Character revealed itself, not in promises or apologies, but in consistent actions over time. Leah joined him on the swing, passing him a steaming mug. "Penny for your thoughts?" "Just reflecting," he said. "On boundaries and what they really mean." "And what's your conclusion?" she asked, settling beside him. "That boundaries aren't walls to keep others out. They're the foundation that makes real connection possible." He took her hand, the gesture now familiar and cherished. When someone respects your boundaries, they're respecting you. When they don't, they're telling you everything you need to know. The most valuable wisdom rarely came from comfort, but from navigating life's deepest challenges with integrity. His journey had taught him not to fear vulnerability, but to be discerning about who earned access to his heart. The difference between blind trust and open-eyed faith was everything. "We build the future we deserve," Jackson said softly, "one boundary at a time." As darkness settled and stars emerged, the porch light cast a gentle glow around them. The path forward wasn't guaranteed to be smooth, but it was authentically theirs, built on mutual respect, clear communication, and the courage to believe in goodness again, not despite life's hardships, but because of the strength they revealed.